Okay, so before we get really in depth into this lore, because I'm going to go over like the deities in more depth later. But first, I'm just going to give a basic overview so you have like a general idea of like the deities in Tamriel. So, Akatosh, the god of time to the humans, known as Ariel to the Altmer and Bosmer, where he is an ancestral hero spirit, known as Alkosh to the Khajiit, where he is also an ancestral hero spirit to them. Lorcan, the god who convinced the other gods to construct the mortal plane, viewed with disdain by the Altmer and Bosmer, who hate him for sundering their connection to the divine world and trapping them on the mortal world, and viewed as good by the humans, the Nords, and the Imperials specifically, because they believe they wouldn't exist without him, viewed negatively as Sheor by the Bretons, but viewed positively by the Dunmer, who believe that he opened the way for apotheosis of mortal spirits, which they are, and aspire to apotheosize. Kinnereth, the goddess of wind, worshipped only by the humans. She married Lorcan in the Nordic myth, where she is known as Kine, and she also created humans by breathing them into existence on the top of the throat of the world in Skyrim. To the Imperials, when Shezar died, it rained for the first time. She's associated with rain, which is like mourning of Lorcan. To the Redguard, she is known as Tava, who helped them escape from Yokuda when it was destroyed. Stendar is the god of mercy, worshipped by the Imperials, Bretons, and the Altmer and Bosmer. Stendar to the elves is the apologist of man because, men teamed up with Shor because they thought he was good, and elves teamed up against Shor because they thought he was bad. But Stendar for the elves was like, hey, men aren't actually, awful. And to the Nords, he was he was Stoon, and was the spirit of, ransom, teaching men the value of taking prisoners as opposed to just killing their enemies outright. Mara is the goddess of love and family. She is pretty much worshipped by every civilization except for the Dunmer. And to the Nords, she is the handmaiden to Kine. Magnus is a god who is only worshipped by the Altmer, Bosmer, and Bretons, and is the god of magic. Where Lorcan started the project of creating the world, Magnus provided the plan for doing so. But he, along with most of the spirits who participated in the creation of the mortal plane, left the mortal plane before it became a separate plane, so they wouldn't get stuck on it. But part of Magnus remained on Mundus, and in later lore, it would be that he, in escaping, ripped a hole in the sky, i.e. the sun, which allowed magic through from Aetherius, light being magic. Anyway, Magnus is also worshipped as Magnus by the Khajiit. Stindar is also Shrindar, and Kinnereth is Kinarthi to the Khajiit. Joan and Jode, the moons, are worshipped by the Bosmer, but it's not really said what they stand for. But both of these moons are worshipped as aspects of Jakaje by the Khajiit, which is the lunar lattice whereby the mortal plane is somehow metaphysically protected. Riddlethar is the proper way of doing things to the Khajiit as well, somehow linked to the Jakaje, and it's more of like a concept than an actual deity, but it does exist like as a spirit. Then you have Y'ffre. So after Magnus left and the mortal plane was fully created, the mortal spirits did not live in a static world. The laws of nature were constantly changing. Their own forms were constantly changing. So they didn't have even like static bodies. Species didn't have static forms until Y'ffre sacrificed themselves to become the first of the Elnothe, or the Earthbones, the laws of nature, like making that the purpose of their spirit. Others followed Y'ffre, and the world became static. Like the mortal spirits had like permanent forms, and the laws of nature were set. As a result, the Wood Elves who worship Y'ffre the most, they have memories of that time, and they can, in times of dire need, collectively transform into that formlessness to protect themselves. Y'ffre is also one of those spirits which is only worshipped by the Altmer, Bosmer, and Bretons. Then you have Y'ffre is similar to Akatosh in that Akatosh created order out of the formlessness of the beginning place, whereas Y'ffre formed order out of the formlessness of the beginning of the immortal plane. Arkay is the god of time as it affects mortals on the mortal plane. So he is the god of birth, death, spirits, and cycles, so rites of passage, seasons, agriculture. He is worshipped by the humans, but he's also worshipped by the Bosmer. To the Nords, he is Orki, who stole their originally long lifespans. Then you have Xerxes, a god only worshipped by the Bosmer and the Altmer, who records everything that happens and is the elven equivalent to the mortal god of death. But whereas Arkay is focused on cycles, Xerxes is only focused on history and making sure that nothing is forgotten. Julianos is the mortal equivalent to Xerxes, the god of knowledge. And to the Nords, he is known as Junal. Then you have Zenithar, the god of commerce to the Imperials and the Bretons, and is known as Zain to the Bosmer, where instead of being a commerce deity, he is a deity of like the cosmic order. And to the Nords, he is known as Sun, who is the brother of Stune, the Nord equivalent of Stendar, of course, the god of ransom. But he died protecting Shore, so he is no longer worshipped. Then you have Diabella, the goddess of beauty. Morwa, a Redguard deity, is like a combination of Mara and Diabella. So, those are the more traditional divines, but now we get into the more obscure ones. Trinimac was one of one of Ariel's generals in the fight against Shore and Men. But when the Dark Elves, well, what would become the Dark Elves anyway, broke away from the High Elves, Trinimac confronted them, and Boethia, protecting them, ate Trinimac and voided him, and Trinimac became Malakath, and his followers became the Orcs. So Trinimac would become Malakath, the god of the Orcs. Finaster is another early Altmer spirit who taught the Altmer how to live longer by walking differently. It's weird, I know. Cirabane, an Altmer at the end of the First Era who saved the world from the Slode and the Thracian Plague. Rajhin, a Khajiit hero, the best thief in Khajiiti history. For the Imperials, you have Mori House, the Minotaur man, the son of Kinnereth somehow, who conquered the White Gold Tower and thus helped found the Alessian Empire. Rimmon, who created the Second Empire at the end of the First Era, after the Alessian Empire fell. And Tiber Septim, who created the Third Empire at the beginning of the Third Era after Rimmon's empire fell. Onsi, a Redguard spirit, taught men how to create swords. The Hunding is more of a concept than an actual individual spirit. It manifests in individuals or objects in times of like where the Red Guards need to fight for them their existence. But these manifestations also, of course, are individuals in their own right and can also apotheosize separately from the Hunding. One of these was Diagna, who fought against the Orcs in the First Era and gained, divinity upon death. Then you have the Bandar, worshipped by the Bosmer and the Khajiit, the bandit god, which is spread by acts of, charity to the oppressed of society. Now, focusing in a little bit more on the Red Guards, who have quite the interesting, different ideas compared to other people in this universe. Satakal is, for all intents and purposes, Alduin, which is, the Nordic version of Akatosh, where Akatosh is both the god of time, but also the god of the end of time, which creates time again, the cycles of time. So Satakal and Alduin, gods of the cycle of time, as opposed to just time itself. Riptega is a Redguard deity who learned how to escape these cycles by going to a place called the Far Shores. He created Sep, the Redguard version of Lorcan, to help him reach souls to the Far Shores. But Sep betrayed him and created Mundus, which was not a way to the far shores. Tuhuaca is the Red Guard god of death, who is the caretaker of the far shores. And finally, Leki is the daughter of Ribtga, who saved the Red Guards from the left-handed elves on Yokuda before it, was destroyed, which is a very vague story. Now let's get into the Daedric spirits, which are venerated by various cultures, like in the mainstream. So, like Sheogorath, Sheogorath, the god of madness, is revered by the Khajiit. Hermamora, Hermaeus Mora, basically, the Daedra of knowledge, is revered by the Bosmer and viewed as a dangerous testing deity by the Nords. Malak, Malakath, essentially, for the Nords, is also a testing deity, the god of the orcs, the enemies of the Nords. Maluk is, Malakath, the god of orcs, the enemies of the Red Guards, and Malakath, of course, just called Malakath, is the god of the orcs, the enemy of the Dunmer, and viewed as a deity that tests the Dunmer's physical strength. Molag Bal tests the Dunmer's genetic strength. Sheogorath, Molag Bal is the Lord of Domination. Sheogorath tests the Dunmer's mental strength. Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedra of destruction and natural disasters, tests the Dunmer's ability to live on the crazy land of Morrowind itself. Now, when what would become the Dunmer separated from the High Elves and began their journey to Morrowind, they were protected by 3 Daedra that they allied with, while they were avoiding the 4 testing deities. These were the deities that they actually worshipped. So Boethia is the deity of, war, ambition, conspiracy. She was their primary protector. Mephala, the Daedra of webs, and basically, seeing all the strands of fate and pulling them to achieve the desired end. She helped implement Boethia's protection. And Azura, the Daedra of dusk and dawn and mysteries, taught the what would become the Dark Elves to think differently from the Altmer by giving them, mysteries that the Altmer did not have. But then there was this thing called the Battle of Red Mountain, where Nerevar, as far as you know at this point in the video series, defeated the dwarves and allowed the apotheosis of the tribunal. 3 dark elves who, apotheosized. And these were considered to be conceptual extensions and perfections, more tied to the interests of mortals than the detached Daedra. Almalexia being the perfection of Boethia. Almalexia called Mother Morrowind, the protector of the Dunmer people, but without, the bloodthirst of Boethia. Vivek, the seeing all of the strands of fate and the true nature of uh, like Mundus and like the Arbus, like the universe. Um, so Vivek has the mastery aspects of Mephala without the sadistic manipulation. And then, of course, So the Sill, the perfection of Azura, has the like all of the mysteries of Azura. Honestly, So the Sill's kind of worse than Azura, but you know, that's a downgrade. Let's see. I think that's it for that book. That, I mean, it's a really long book. It's a lot of a big long list of names. So yeah, I apologize for how long we took on the very first book, but now we can move on to the rest of these books as a part of this first video. So, the Daedra. We have already mentioned several Daedra, which have mainstream places in the various religions of Tamriel. But now we will speak about all of them. So we've already mentioned Malakath, the god of the orcs. To the orcs, he is revered, of course. He is the Daedra protecting outcasts, and just like other creatures which are spawned in pariah peoples, like the ogres, for example. Hermaeus Mora is the god of forbidden knowledge. Similar to Julianos, but like darker for some reason. Azura, of course, the goddess of dusk and dawn. Oh, and Azura, by the way. Going back to Varieties of Faith for a second, Azura was considered to be the progenitor of the Khajiit people, just as Azura was the progenitor of the Dark Elf people. Anyway, she is, goddess of dusk and dawn. Boethia, of course, Mephala, Sheogorath, Molag-Bal, Mehrunes Dagon. Already mentioned all of... Well, I suppose I can go into a little bit more on Molag-Bal and Mehrunes Dagon. So Molag-Bal is the lord of domination. He basically rules over people, and he would represent, like, enslaving others, whereas Mehrunes Dagon represents pure destruction. So Mehrunes Dagon is change in conflict, whereas Molag-Bal is stasis and domination. There are two Daedra involving the forces of literal darkness. Nocturnal is the Daedric lord of shadow. Thieves often revere her. She represents mortals hiding themselves, but also concepts themselves hiding themselves. Constant mystery, never able to fully answer the conundrums of the world. Namira is like a weirder darkness, like more of a primordial darkness, associated with creatures which cause instinctual disgust to the denizens of Tamriel. But she's very mysterious. Like, what that darkness isn't really talked about that much. Meridia, on the other hand, is associated with light, and much like Archay, doesn't like the undead. Vernima is the Daedra of nightmares and visions. Periite is the Daedra, like, in the Book of Daedra, it's not really mentioned that he is the Daedra of sickness. That's a thing in Skyrim. In the Book of Daedra here, and like the Quest in Oblivion, he is the taskmaster of the quote-unquote lowest orders of Oblivion. Oblivion being the realm that Daedra live in. So he's a taskmaster of like low-ranking Daedra. Clavicus Vile, the Daedra of Pacts, promises, but usually, like a genie, finds a way to make that bad for you. Sanguine, the Daedra of hedonism. And here seen the Daedra of hunting and lycanthropes, i.e., werewolves and things. Now, those are the Daedric princes, but they're also lesser Daedra, like here in this book, Darkest Darkness. So the lesser Daedra are basically like the regular people who live in Oblivion. They are either found like pretty much everywhere in all of the realms of Oblivion, or they are usually associated with serving a specific prince or being in that specific prince's realm. Although according to this book, Varieties of Daedra, that often changes. You can really see any kind of Daedra anywhere, serving anyone. But let's go over the Lesser Daedra then. As presented in Darkest Darkness, this would be the Aeternox, who do not have a particular loyalty. The Hunger Daedra, not seen often, honestly, in Elder Scrolls. I mean, it's in Morrowind and the Shivering Isles. But they generally serve Boethia. They're like weird, like pale people with giant tongues. They're really creepy. Winged Twilights are associated with Zura, Spider Daedra with Mephala, Scamps, Clanfears, and Draemora with Mehur and Stegon. Daedroth, which in other sources is referred to as like the singular of Daedra, as opposed to like, well, the plural of just Daedra. But anyway, in this book, Darkest Darkness, Daedroth is an alligator man who a species of alligator men, basically, which generally have loyalty to Molag Bal. The Ogreens have loyalty to Malakath, unsurprisingly. The Golden Saints are lesser Daedra of Sheogorath. And yeah, those are the general lesser spirits, but the Varieties of Daedra book goes more into Draemora specifically, because Draemora, unlike the other creatures, are very sentient, sapient. They think exactly, well, not exactly like humans. They think like humans, but they're pretty evil. So they call themselves the Kin, Kyn, which means people, and the plural of that is Kainaz. And they have a hierarchy based on two broad castes. So the officer caste is also the royalty caste. The highest class of Draemora are known as Valkainaz, which means prince, and they are Mehrunes Dagon's guards. The Markainaz, or dukes, are part of Mehrunes Dagon's like advisory council. The Kin Marcher, the Kine Marcher, is a lord of a citadel, outpost, or gates. So whenever you close those gates in Oblivion, a Kin Marcher in lore is supposed to be in charge of those. Although, of course, when you get to a certain level, they're just all going to be Valkainazes, but whatever. Then there's the Kinreeve, the clan sheriff, who leads like units of Draemora fighters. Then there is the soldier / commoner class. Like literally all Draemora are in a military structure. So the Kinvals are the highest of this caste. They're like NCOs, non-commissioned officers. Caitiffs are the berserkers, and churls are... They're not brave enough to be caitiffs, so they're looked down on. So they are very like obedient to their masters, but they're also extremely cruel to those beneath them, to like due to that like frustration of being a churl. Then this book, The Spirit of the Daedra, talks about the way that Draemora specifically think in general. So the Draemora are loyal to the clan structure because it's strong and it protects each individual member. The clan structure itself swears fealty to a Daedric prince so that they can be protected by said prince, but this is a contract which can be broken, and another contract can be made with a different Daedric prince, for example. Also, they view humans in this. They use like the analogy of like the hunt. Like they view humans like a hunter would view a rabbit. Sometimes they secretly want the humans to escape from their hunt, and they admire the skill of their quarry sometimes. But in the end, you know, they don't care enough to, you know, not hunt people. But one of the interesting things is because they're immortal, they can't comprehend why mortals would have any hope. So that's their limitation. This book goes over the different commands of the 9 divines. These are fairly predictable. Stendar's like protect the weak, you know, the god of mercy. Arche, the god of death. Honor the dead, you know, don't just respect them, don't do necromancy. Mara is like have a peaceful family. Zenithar is like work and don't steal. Talos is defend the people of Tamriel through war for some reason. Kinnereth to use nature's gifts but to not abuse it. Diabella to love art, love, and friendship. Julianus who suggests seeking wisdom from the wise when confused. Akatosh, who says obey the empire. And then the 9 as a whole, like, you know, it's just the golden rule. Like, you know, treat others how you want to be treated. Now, Shezar and the Divines. This explains how the imperial version of Shor, i.e. Shezar, was created like as a concept to appease the Nords who helped the Imperials gain control over the White Gold Tower with, you know, like Mori House and everything, way back when. Shezar was made to like to satisfy the Nords because the Nords like Shor. But because the 9 Divines religion was also very much heavily influenced by like elven ideas, Shezar wasn't so much an elf hater as much as he was like a protector of humans from the elves. But in the 3rd era, he was basically like completely irrelevant. Because there was like there wasn't much interspecies tension while the 3rd Empire reigned. Now that we have all of the divines out of the way, we can talk about the individual stories of each divine. So, there are a lot of them. This one, Nightfall, is about a knight called Garridan Stalros. His fief was like suffering from famine, and he decided to go on a quest for this artifact called the Everfloat Viewer. He found it in a place called the Frostfire Glade, but he was attacked by, surprise, surprise, a Frost Aetronaut. Oh, and the Everflow Viewer creates endless water, that's why he wanted it. So he blocked the Frost Aetronaut's attack with the Everflow Viewer, which caused a giant like ice cube to form around them both. And he cried, because he knew that he had failed in his mission. But then it started raining at his place because Mara had intervened in her benevolence towards this noble knight. These next books are from Daggerfall, and they haven't really come back. But I'm considering Daggerfall lore canon here because I think it's really interesting when you mesh Daggerfall lore with like Morrowind and Oblivion lore. Anyway, this book, Arche the God, is about how Arche apotheosized. So if you recall, I said that Arche was is considered by some to be a mortal who apotheosized. This book explains that Arche was a shop owner who found this book about the nature of life and death and read it constantly and really wanted to fully understand it, but he started spending so much of his effort on it that his shop failed and his family left him and he was dying. And in his dying breath, he prayed to Mara, who, and he said he wanted more time to study this, and so Mara appeared to him and gave him a choice of he could either apotheosize or die. Because Mara saw the insight he had gained into life and death and thought, okay, he could make a potentially useful god in balancing the souls of the living and the dead. And Arche chose to apotheosize, and that is how Arche became a divine. Then you have Geoffrey. Geoffrey is Yifri, just Daggerfall spelled it differently. This just says that Yifri taught, the birds their songs and the water its sound and stuff. And so you can kind of see how Michael Kirkbride and Varieties of Faith in the Empire took this and this thing which originally was probably not meant to be. Geoffrey created the laws of nature, and made the original metaphorically leading to his conclusion, which is kind of interesting. Then we have the first scroll of the Bandar. This is where I get the idea that the Bandar is a concept more than an actual entity from, in a similar way to the Hunding, because that's how it's described in this book from Daggerfall. Then, of course, we start to have deities which aren't mentioned in Varieties of Faith in the Empire because they were only mentioned in Daggerfall and not elsewhere, but they're also really cool. So, Ebonarm. Ebonarm is a Redguard deity, a god of war. One of his arms is a sword. It got replaced by a sword when he lost it. And the battle's the beginning of Mundus, the beginning of the world. This story of him in this book, essentially, there are two armies fighting, and Ebonarm appears, and he gets the leaders to talk, and they call off the war. So despite the fact that he is a great warrior, he shows that the ultimate victory is understanding and avoiding war in the first place. Oleander's hammer continues this theme. Where the field of battle that Ebonarm stopped the war on. There's this hammer in the ground, and these kids want to try to get the hammer, but there's this old guardian dude who says, when the soldiers were leaving the field of battle after Ebonarm made peace, this mage came up to this to this soldier who was resting and wanted his enchanted hammer, but he wouldn't give it to him, and so they started to duel, but he hit his enchanted hammer on the mage just as the mage was casting this weird spell, and so they both died. And the hammer was cursed. So I suppose it means, like, you never win through conflict, so, a similar message to the Ebon Arm book. Then you have King Edward. This is a really cool book series from Daggerfall that was never carried forward. It has 12 parts. It is really long. It is longer than the unedited version of Real Baron Zaya. It is a... and it's unfinished, unfortunately. Like, the story is pretty consistent from parts 1 through 8. Parts 9 through 10 take a break to focus on a specific character's backstory. Other parts before that did as well, but this is a two-parter, that's new. Then after this, in parts 11 through 12, it's like, it was clear, like, whoever writing it realized, they had run out of time. So they just spent parts 11 and 12 on all of the musings on the metaphysical nature of Elder Scrolls that they wanted to write before, time was up. So it's kind of like a normal story until you have this flashback, and then it just kind of goes off into nowhere in parts 11 through 12. But regardless, even parts 11 through 12, which I also have here, are really good, and it's a really nice book series, even if it's not, like, fully finished or, like, fully focused. And a lot of the, like, really cool concepts that unfortunately probably aren't going to come back anytime soon are in them. So in parts 9 through 10, we hear that one of the main characters is descended from this guy named Sai, who is the origin of the luck stat in these games. He is the god of luck. So, mortals can be born with various interesting features that only they, like, that specific individual has. An example in Oblivion would be the prophet in the Leyawen Mages Guild, for example, her and her family. They passed on that specific trait. Sai was born with this freak trait that no one else has had, where he made everyone around him lucky. But, like, he himself wasn't affected or was negatively affected by him. So when he was still really young, he was forced to fight in a war by his liege lord. That lord won the battle because of Sai's luck ability, luck-giving ability. But in the process, Sai died. But when he died, Ebon Arm appeared to him, and he was like, hey. He gave him the same choice that Mara gave Arcade, which is, like, you can apotheosize and become the god of luck, or you can die. And because Sai was young, he chose the option of apotheosizing, because he hadn't lived his life yet. So the reason why Ebon Arm approached Sai is because he thought that this skill that he had could be very useful, because the gods were always quarreling over what should happen. But this caused stasis to happen, and through that stasis, things became unbalanced anyway, so maybe just luck itself could, like, make things even out. And because he was so young, Ebon Arm let him keep his body for a while. So Sai traveled around Tamriel and, the world to make sure everyone had like an equal amount of luck, because like it emanated out from him. But then he found this woman, and he saved her from a really unlucky situation where she stepped out of her house and was lost in a snowstorm, basically. And he ended up falling in love with her and marrying her. But because he lived in one place for so long, which was Skyrim, King Harold of Skyrim wiped out the snow elves. Yes, this book is the origin of that. The origin of the snow elves being killed off by the Nords is from this book series. And Skyrim also expanded into the lands of Morrowind and High Rock. Yeah, a lot of concepts in this book series are really influential in the series, believe it or not. So Ebenarm and Mara and Yifri all appear to Sai and tell him that he has to give up his body. He has to give up his body. And travel the world again because he's made the Nords too lucky. And that has upset the balance. And so Sai is basically forced to agree, but Mara takes pity on him and allows him to visit his wife and his descendants once a night every year. And they can know that he's there because they are more lucky that night, which is really sweet. But anyway, that is that god. Here's another god that is mentioned in the Varieties of Faith in the Empire. Another god from Daggerfall, specifically Luce, the animal god. So, this is a concept that I haven't really touched on that much yet. We'll get to it. But faith and worship in Elder Scrolls empowers gods. It gives them power, it allows them to have godly powers. So, if animals can't, they may not be able to think very deeply, but they do still have feelings. So, if enough animals in one place are abused, like by, say, a farmer that kills off too many of his cattle or whatever, or abuses them, then maybe their collective desire for saving could create an entity as well. And, yeah, this book has a story of that happening where, the god of animals, Luce, is essentially summoned by a bunch of animals who being abused by a farmer, and Luce eats the farmer like the farmer's been eating them. Although this book, according to unofficial sources as well, the forum posts from people who wrote it, it's not meant to be taken seriously, it's meant to be a joke. And also, hang on, let me show you. It says, praise to Pelagius Septim III right here, who, of course, is Pelagius the Mad. So it very much could be that this book was written by, someone touched by Sheogorath. But I still think it's a really cool concept, even if it's supposed to be taken as a joke. Vernacus and Borlor is an interesting story about how there are more Daedra princes than just the princes in, the Book of Daedra. It's just some of them have fallen out. Some of them are really obscure. Some of them have fallen out of favor over time. This is about basically a Daedric prince that came to be and then fell out of favor. So what he did was he he evaded an arrow from, like, Kinnereth's chosen warrior by teleporting away in fear, and became known as the Daedra of evasion. But then people started throwing rocks at his shrines, and, you know, the rocks would all hit and people would laugh at him, so he, like, came in defense of his shrine, but he was, like, pelted with rocks, and, you know, like, everyone lost faith in him, and it was really embarrassing. So yeah, that is that story. Another joke-y story, but interesting nonetheless. You have some stories about Boethia's glory. Like, you know, how do I sum this up? Conflict is inevitable, and you have to learn to like it if you like Boethia or something. The story of Lysirius is about a follower of Boethia who used one of Boethia's old artifacts called the Fearstruck Shield to destroy the Akaviri invaders, but in so doing, the shield was also destroyed, like permanently. That artifact, Boethia no longer owns it because it was destroyed in the process. Anyway, so the Akaviri invaded Tamriel. Like, I mean, I'm not sure. Like, this could either be like retconned, like, by Rimmon turning the Akaviri forces, or retconned by there being multiple Akaviri invasions. But suffice to say that, like, according to this story, Lysirius was the one who sent the Akaviri back home. And he did so by finding a dragon, which of course, you know, the Akaviri came there to kill, and stabbing the dragon in a way to where the dragon couldn't reach him, so the dragon was flying around all rapidly, and in that rapidly flying around, destroyed the Akaviri army. Boethia's Pillow Book is a thing from a Morag Conquest. When you open it up, it literally just says no words can describe what you see or what you think you see. The Invocation of Azura describes how Azura legitimately cares about her followers, as opposed to Nocturnal, who only wants her followers' curiosity, or Boethia, who literally just doesn't care about her followers because she's, you know, like a spirit of conflict. Azura, you know, cares, and that's that story. Then you have the legendary Scourge, which is about the Mace of Malakath, not the Mace of Malagbal, but the Mace of Malakath. The Mace of Malakath was created by Malakath to help banish Daedra, specifically only to be able to be used by immortals, and it is essentially, quote-unquote, a friend to the friendless, because a mortal surrounded by Daedra would be friendless, and of course, Malakath is already the patron of outcasts. In fact, in the game Battlespire, you use this mace to you use this mace to save the Battlespire. Well, specifically get rid of, like, one Daedra, but, you know, it's all a part of it. The posting of the hunt is also from the posting of the hunt is also from Battlespire. It involves, so there's a part in the Battlespire where Nehruin's Dagon uses this subplane of Oblivion where people are constantly engaged in this ritual hunt to like he uses this as a place where he imprisoned this mage who tried to betray him, and you have to get through it in order to defeat Mehrunes Dagon. And this just describes like the rules of that hunt. Beggar Prince describes this guy named Weedle who talks to Namira, and Namira gives him a blessing that he did not want, which is the ability to be disgusted by everyone. But he learns that it really is a blessing because of becoming a disgusting beggar. No one takes him seriously, and he's able to gain like all the secrets of the land. Before we move on to Tamrielic lore, let me go back to Darkest Darkness, because I forgot something. So Conjuration allows casters to summon Daedra or Daedric entities bound in weapons into Mundus for a limited time, but longer-term bindings can occur through like more ritualistic magic or through blessing of a Daedra, essentially. So, now, Tamrielic lore. These involve magical artifacts. All of these artifacts have one thing in common, which is that they will always disappear from the holder of the item at some point. These have been a part of Elder Scrolls since Arena. And it's interesting, like, what the origin of them might be. I have a theory myself. So you usually get these, like, from Daedra, whether that be, like, in Daggerfall or Morrowind or Oblivion. So, the Ebony Mail is owned by Boethia, Mace of Molag Bal, obvious, Mask of Clavicus Vile, which was crafted for a woman named Avila, who wanted to marry a nobleman, and the mask allowed her to do that, but when the mask disappeared, she was killed by the nobleman, because her charisma dropped. Mehrunes Razor, the dagger of Mehrunes Dagon, the Cuirass of the Savior's Hide, the Cuirass of Hircine, the Spear of Bitter Mercy, which, you know, as previously talked about the posting of the hunt, that was the spear that you got from there, which allowed you to actually banish Mehrunes Dagon from the Battlespire. The Daedric Scourge, of course, that's Malakath's, the Mace of Malakath. The Bow of Shadows is an interesting artifact that Nocturnal owns. And of course, the Daedric Crescent Blade was used by Dagon's troops in the capture of the Battlespire. But there are also Aedric artifacts, such as the Lord's Mail, which is called also the Gift of Kinnereth and the Armor of Morihaus. So it's not hard to imagine that this armor was gifted to Morihaus by Kinnereth, or his mom. The Staff of Magnus, the Warlock's Ring of Ciribane, what made him famous, what allowed him to save Tamriel from the Thracian Plague. The Ring of Finaster and the Ring of Khajiit, made by Rajin. But then there are a ton of these artifacts which were actually crafted by mortals. Among them includes Spellbreaker, which was originally Dwarven, and according to the Arena Manual, the Skeleton's Key was originally crafted by mages. But both of these are handed out by Daedra in Oblivion. And also the artifacts which Daedra possess change hands from game to game. So my theory when it comes to like the origin of a lot of these enchanted items is that they're often made by ambitious mortals who have creativity. Of course, the Daedra don't have a ton of creativity. They're kind of stuck in their own realms. And so these artifacts are appropriated oftentimes by Daedra after they are lost by their original owners, to be used as like commodities or like rewards for mortals to who do their bidding. Anyway, the ones crafted by mortals mentioned in this book include the Fists of Rangedolf, who was a guy who fought in Harold's Conquests, the Ice Blade of the Monarch by Almian Selma, the Mentor's Ring by Carni Asaronis, the Vampire Ring crafted by a vampire paladin, Elidon's Ward, enchanted as a reward for Elidon the Knight, the Staff of Sadoki, a mage who bound his own soul into this staff because he was so lonely, the Bloodworm Helm, crafted by the King of Worms, Manimarco himself, the Dragonbone Mail, crafted by Zurin Arctus, the battle mage of Tiber Septim, otherwise known as the Underking, Skull Crusher, made by Durakusal and Hilron Rolanus, the Fang of Heinek Namet, a tooth from a Wamasus, slain by Nords and Argonia, the Umbra Sword, crafted by Nena Weir, and the Helm of Orain Bearclaw, a Bosmer hero. Yes, and then there are some of unknown origin, like Chrysanmir, the Paladin's Blade, the Ring of Surroundings, the Boots of the Apostle, the Ring of the Wind, Goldbrand, which might have been crafted by dragons according to this book, and Din Stagmer's Ring. Din Stagmer is not the creator of this ring. It says in this book that no one has any idea what that means. So yeah, that is part 1. In part 2, we will be talking about the nature, like how exactly these gods became gods, what being a god in Elder Scrolls even means, and what the beings in Elder Scrolls even are. So yeah, hope to see you there, and hope you enjoy. Bye.